High in the Himalayas, a conflict simmers, one with the potential to ignite a global firestorm. This is the Kashmir Conflict, a territorial dispute between India and Pakistan, both nuclear-armed nations. The existence of nuclear weapons transforms this from a regional conflict into a terrifying global threat. This is not merely a regional conflict, it is a global concern that demands our immediate attention. The time for dialogue, diplomacy, and a concerted international effort is now. The seeds of the Kashmir conflict were sown in the dying days of the British Empire. As the British prepared to withdraw from India in 1947, they partitioned the subcontinent into two states, India and Pakistan. The partition, hastily executed and deeply flawed, was based on the notion of dividing the land between Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan. However, the situation on the ground was far more complex. Kashmir, with a Muslim-majority population but ruled by a Hindu Maharaja, became a point of contention. The Maharaja's indecision over which nation to join created a vacuum that was quickly filled by violence and chaos. Pakistan argued that Kashmir should naturally become a part of their nation, given its Muslim-majority population. India, on the other hand, asserted its claim based on the Maharaja's eventual decision to accede to India, a decision made under duress as Pakistani tribesmen invaded the region. This dispute led to the first of two wars between India and Pakistan over Kashmir in 1947, a war that ended in a stalemate and a divided Kashmir, with India controlling the majority of the territory. The second war, in 1965, also ended without resolving the underlying issue, further solidifying the divisions and hardening the positions of both sides. The unresolved status of Kashmir became a festering wound, poisoning relations between India and Pakistan for decades to come. The specter of nuclear war hangs over the Kashmir conflict like a sword of Damocles. Both India and Pakistan possess nuclear weapons, and the possibility of their use, however unthinkable, cannot be ignored. The 1998 nuclear tests by both countries, a mere weeks apart, sent shockwaves across the world. These tests were a stark reminder of the potential for catastrophic escalation in the region. The international community expressed its horror and concern, but these pronouncements did little to alter the dangerous dynamics at play. The presence of nuclear weapons transforms the Kashmir conflict from a regional dispute into a global threat. Any conflict between India and Pakistan carries with it the risk of escalation, a risk that could spiral out of control. The consequences of a nuclear exchange between these two nations are almost too horrific to contemplate. Millions would die instantly, and the long-term effects of radiation would be felt for generations. The global environment would suffer irreparable damage and the world would be plunged into a nuclear winter. While the Kashmir conflict simmers, the world's attention is often focused elsewhere. Global crises, from climate change to economic instability, compete for the attention of policymakers and the public alike. This lack of sustained international focus allows the situation in Kashmir to fester, creating a dangerous breeding ground for extremism and violence. The international community cannot afford to be complacent. The Kashmir conflict is not someone else's problem. It is a global security threat that requires a concerted and sustained effort to find a resolution. The dangers of inaction are simply too great to ignore. The lack of international pressure allows both India and Pakistan to maintain the status quo, a status quo that is inherently unstable and dangerous. The world must demand better from both nations. It is time for India and Pakistan to demonstrate leadership and a commitment to peace. Dialogue, not violence, is the only path forward. There can be no military solution to the Kashmir conflict. Any attempt to resolve this dispute through force will only lead to further suffering and instability. The only viable path forward is through dialogue, diplomacy, and a willingness to compromise. India and Pakistan must engage in direct and sustained negotiations aimed at finding a lasting solution. The international community has a vital role to play in facilitating this process. The United Nations, regional powers, and global leaders must use their influence to bring both sides to the negotiating table. They must act as honest brokers, encouraging dialogue and confidence-building measures. The people of Kashmir have suffered for far too long. They deserve a future free from violence, repression, and fear. A just and lasting solution must be found, a solution that respects the aspirations of all Kashmiris. The world must not allow this conflict to fester for another 70 years. The time for action is now.